Eloise here today for Lawnfawn and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a thank you card to share with you all. I'm going to be using the Let's Go Nuts stamp set as my main focal point, and I'm also going to be pulling in the Thanks, Thanks, Thanks stamp set as well. I just really love all of the different fonts of thanks in this set, and I'm going to be using the scripty one today. And I'm going to be using additional sentiments from the Let's Go Nuts stamp set as well. I'm also going to be making this ripped frame look. I've seen quite a few people do this before and I just really love the look of it. How it's like very organic, and I just think it works really well for this type of window card. So I'm going to be doing that today. I started off with a piece of white cardstock that I just cut to 3 3/4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and that's just so I can mount it onto a card base and it to have a nice border. I then went ahead and created a cross in the middle with an X-Acto knife just to help me create this frame. And then pulling from one of the edges and just tearing the cardstock just to make the edge exposed, and for like the top layer of cardstock to come off on the top layer. I just really like this look. I love how natural it is, and how you can kind of create like any shape that you want. I guess it is a little bit hard to control just because you are ripping it, but you can, I guess, manipulate it a little bit to make it fit your design more. And I really just wanted like this little opening there, and it's just kind of oval rectangular shaped. I really like the way that turned out, and now it's time to work on my images. I'm going to be colouring in all of these images today with Copic markers just because they're my favourite. I'm starting off with colouring in the squirrels, so I'm going to be using the E30 line of markers for this. So for the one on the left, I'm making him a little bit lighter, so I used E35, E33, E31 and E30. And for the one on the right, I'm making him just a tad darker, and so I just used E37, E35, E33 and E31. So for each of them, I just dropped the top or the bottom colour shown on the screen. And I like that they're still in the same tone, but just one's a little bit darker and one is lighter. So it's an easy way to colour these guys in. Once I've coloured those in, I've just added the shadows where I think the darkest areas would be and then coloured all of those in. I am moving on to the Acorns. I'm using E50s for this. So I'm using the darker E50s for the tops. I'm using E59, E57, E55 and E53 and just colouring those in. And then for the bottoms of the Acorns, I'm again using E50 line, but I'm just using the lighter colours. So E55, E53, E51 and E50. And again, I like how they match really nicely, but the top's darker and the bottom's lighter, which is super nice, even though I use a few of the same colours. I'm using some greens for one of the squirrel's little scarves, and then just using some red, oranges and yellows for the leaves and the little wagon. So I'm using R89, R27, R24 and R17 for those. And I just coloured in one of the leaves and then the little wagon. I then coloured one orange leaf just using some YR markers, YR09, YR07, YR04 and YR02. I did a couple yellow leaves with Y19, Y15, Y13 and Y11. And finished off the wagon with C7, C5, C3 and C1. Once those are all coloured, I went ahead and added some white details just using a white gel pen, and then I cut those out as well as the thanks sentiment as well. And now I'm pulling out some watercolour cardstock just to do some ink blending on. I love doing my ink blending on watercolour cardstock. It blends together really nicely and generally doesn't have a lot of harsh lines, which is why I use it so much. So I'm just cutting this down to be a little bit smaller than the initial white frame piece, just so it fits behind really nicely. I think this turned out to be around 3.5 inches by 5 inches. I'm then going to use a ton of distress inks to ink blend on there, as well as some blending brushes. I'm doing kind of like sunset colors, so I start off with mustard seed in the very center, and I'm just ink blending that on there, darker on the outsides and lighter on the insides. I'm then going to move on to the color Wild Honey, and I'm just going to ink blend that a little bit further up, so overlapping the mustard seed just to get a really nice even blend. But just pulling that colour up a little bit more to create that gradient. I'm then moving on to Spiced Marmalade, which again is just a little bit darker than Wild Honey. And I'm ink blending that, going more towards the top as well. And this is all using the same brush. Since I'm moving from lighter to darker, it's really easy to do that. And it's a lot quicker as well. Now I'm using Carved Pumpkin. And lastly, I'm using Ripe Persimmon, which is quite a lot darker, but I definitely wanted that darker colour right at the very top. Once the orange to yellow side is done, I'm just doing a little bit of ground. So I started off with some Twisted Citron and just ink blended that in very lightly, being careful to not overlap the colours too much. But I still want there to be not really any like white left over, but I think I'm going to build up the colours just with the other two as well. Now I'm using Mowed Lawn and ink blending that in as well. And then I'm going to end off with a little bit of Gathered Twigs just at the very edges, even though in the end you don't see the gathered twigs. I just did that just in case you did, and I liked that green to be a little bit darker, but like not muddy at all. So now that my background is all completed, I just put the frame over the top to make sure that it looked good, and I really like the way it looked. So I just went ahead and took my spritzer bottle, and I'm just flicking on a few water droplets onto the background. I dried it off with a paper towel and completely dried it with a heat tool. I then added a double layer of frame tape onto the back of my frame, and I'm just lining it up over my Distress inked background, and I'm adhering it down into place. Now it's time to arrange my little scene, so I'm just going to be using a mixture of glue tube adhesive as well as foam tape to adhere all of these pieces together. So I'm starting off with using the glue tube to adhere the little scarf onto one of the squirrels, and also the stack of acorns into the wagon. So I just added some glue on the back and adhered the acorns into place, lining those up inside of my scene just with one layer of foam tape and adhering them in. Same with the little squirrel on the left as well. And then I'm adding some glue to the back of these leaves and adhering those into place as well. I end up changing the location of a few of the leaves later on, as you'll see in the final shot, just because I wanted them to appear like they were falling from the sky a little bit more. They just looked a little bit strange, all like being layered on the bottom, so I changed it up a little bit. I added foam tape onto the back of that thanks sentiment and adhered that in the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and white heat emboss the rest of the sentiments as well. So I just used the Awe and Friend from the Let's Go Nuts stamp set and just white heat embossed that onto some black licorice cardstock. I again added foam tape onto the back of these, and then I'm going to stick them in front and behind the thanks word, so it says "or thanks friend." I thought that was super cute, and I just really wanted to add like a little scripty word in there as well, so that's why I mixed up the sentiments a little bit from two different sets. I really like doing that. So once I added foam tape on the back of those, I just adhered them into place, and then that pretty much finishes up my card for today. I'm just going to go ahead and mount this onto a card base off camera, but I really like the way it turned out. I loved that little ripped frame. It's something that's so easy to do, and you could do this on a tag or on anything really, and I think it just adds like just that extra little bit of interest. And it was also really helpful if you don't have like many shaped dies to create windows. You can kind of create your own just by ripping it, and it definitely gives it a different effect. I think it would be really cool for a Halloween card as well as like a fall themed card. I think that they match really nicely in those different styles. So thank you so much for stopping by today. All of the supplies will be listed down below and linked over at the blog, and I will catch you all next time. Thanks so much for stopping by today.